Alright, guys, so with it being the international break currently, I figured now is as good a time as ever to do some more kind of discussion videos, talk about some things. And so today I figured I would do a Premier League midfielders tier list. So I just have a bunch of midfielders here, and we're just going to rank them. So world class, obviously, I want to keep this kind of exclusive, so I'm going to say top three to top five are going to be world class because I think if you're world class, then you're top three to top five in your position. But the rest of the tier list, very good, obviously, good, decent, average. Hasn't played, I have just for people that I don't think have played enough to be judged fairly. And then awful is, of course, reserved for Man United players. So let's get into it with Sandro Tonali. And he, unfortunately, is going to go in hasn't played because he has been banned for most of the season, which I think is unfortunate because he is a very gifted player. But unfortunately, he is being suspended on betting charges and he will not play until next season. Next up, we have Joelinton. Now, for me, I like Joelinton. I'm going to put him in good. I think he's a player that he's very strong, he's very physical, he's very, he has a great presence in midfield. I don't think he is the best in the world, but he's fairly good. He is fairly good. And so I'm going to put him in good. Bruno Guimaraes, however, I'm going to put in very good. He's not quite at that world-class level for me, but he is very, very close to it. I think his passing ability, his technical ability is absolutely unreal. And really, I think we just need to see him do it on the biggest stage. I'm talking the Champions League, I'm talking in a real, Premier League title race in order for him to be considered world class. But I think he's a fantastic player. Next up, we got Moises Caicedo. He's been decent since he's moved to Chelsea, but for 115 million, I really expected more. I expected so much more out of Caicedo because I believe that with the right coaching, I think this guy's got world class potential. If he finds that coaching at Chelsea, probably not. But listen, if he's able to go elsewhere, save his career, I think he could turn into an absolute monster. But he's going to go into decent for now. Dahoud was brought in to replace Caicedo at Brighton, and he has been. I'm going to put him in decent as well. I think he's been, he's been decent. He's been nothing special, but I don't think he's done a particularly poor job either. Now we got Pascal Gross. I like Pascal Gross, actually. I'm going to put him in good. I think this season he's definitely been better than Caicedo. He's been better than Dahoud, I think. He's been Brighton's best player, I think, arguably, this season. And I just think he's a very underrated player. I don't really see people talking about him much, but undeniably a very technical midfielder. And yeah, I think he's good. Next up we got Rodri, world class in my opinion. Well, I think in most people's opinions, world class. I don't think he's been the best defensive midfielder in the world this season. I think there's been one who's been better. We're going to talk about him in a minute. But in terms of his body of work over the last 2 or 3 years, I think he is the best defensive midfielder in the world in terms of doing it again on the biggest stage, Champions League finals, the run in the Premier League, being part of a treble winning side, a huge contributor to a treble winning side. A side that's won 3, maybe 4 Premier League titles in a row. Absolutely unreal, for being honest, by Rodri. So, yeah, he goes into world class for me. Same with Kevin De Bruyne, and the same with Bernardo Silva. I think All three of these players are elite. They're on a different level. I think if you look at De Bruyne, I think he's been playing as probably the best midfielder in the world for a couple of years at this point. The numbers that he puts up in terms of assists, even goals, he's a decent goal scorer. And I just think City have looked like a completely different team since he has come back from injury this season. So, yeah, I just think he's unbelievable. And Bernardo Silva, I think, is a very special player in terms of that you could consider him world class in multiple positions. I think you could say he's a world class midfielder, and I think he's arguably a world class winger. He has the ability to play out wide. He can beat players 1v1 on the dribble. So he's absolutely unreal. Next up, we have Kovacic. For me, he's been decent this season. Maybe put him in average. Not really sure about that. I'm gonna put him in average because I think you could argue that someone like Caicedo's been better than him. And I just don't think that he offers the same kind of presence in City's midfield when the likes of Rodri or De Bruyne are out. And, obviously he's a skilled player, but it's nothing special. Next up, we got Odegaard. He goes straight into world class, in my opinion. Again, maybe a little biased because I'm an Arsenal fan, but I don't think you can look at what Odegaard's done over the last 2 years. Last season, top scoring midfielder in terms of open play goals in Premier League history. Only one goal off of Frank Lampard's record. But then, again, when you consider Lampard took penalties, Odegaard, 15 non-penalty goals. Was absolutely incredible. Only one less goal involvement than De Bruyne last season. And then this season, with him being the top chance creator in Europe's top 7 leagues. It's just absolutely unreal what Odegaard's been doing. And so for me, he has to go into world class. Next up, we got Thomas Partey. My guy's played 3 games, and then he got injured for the whole season, and he's just coming back now. So I love Thomas Partey when he's on the pitch, but it's just getting him on the pitch that's a little bit challenging. Next up, we got Declan Rice. For me, he is the last player on this list that gets to go into world class. I just don't think that you can look at what he's been doing this season and put him anywhere else, to be 100% honest. I think this season, he's been the best defensive midfielder in the world. Arguably the best midfielder in the world, in my opinion, when you look at his all-around game, what he's been doing. His ball striking is elite. His ball carrying is elite. His anticipation, his reading of the game is elite. His tackling technique, his aerial ability, his leadership, everything this guy does is absolutely sensational. And, the way that he has worn that £100 million price tag, and the way that, he's made it look like a very reasonable price for a midfielder. So, yeah, he has to go into world class, in my opinion. Next up, we have Carney Chukwuemeka, young player at Chelsea. Looks promising, but he's been injured for most of the season. So, I have to put him in, hasn't played. Next up, we have Joao Palhinha. For me, he goes into very good. I love Palhinha. I think he's exceptional at what he does in terms of breaking up play, being physical, kind of dominating a midfield. In that kind of sense, he is absolutely amazing. But I do think that he is lacking on the ball, which is what separates him from people like Declan Rice and Rodri. I think if Palhinha improved his ability on the ball, improved going forward a little bit, he would absolutely be world class. But I just don't think he is at that level yet. So he's going to be just shy of world class for me. Bissouma, for me, he is decent. There was a lot of hype around him when he was at Brighton. The hype's died down a lot, rightfully so, in my opinion. I don't think that he is everything that people talked him up to be, but he's still a good player. He still had a very good season for Tottenham, minus the red cards and obviously the disciplinary record. So, yeah, Basuma, for me, he goes into decent. I think you could argue putting him in good, because I do think maybe you could see he's had a better season than Caicedo. But then when you factor in the red cards, I think that has to take, you have to take some points away from him for the disciplinary record. But yeah, I'm going to keep him in decent. Oliver Skip for me goes into average. Just whatever. He's an okay player. Hasn't really done anything special, but hasn't been atrocious either. James Madison, for me, he goes into very good. I think his creative ability, his eye for a final ball, is something that is truly special in the Premier League. I don't think he's as complete in terms of his creation as Odegaard. I don't think he can kind of drop deep and dictate games the same way that Odegaard can. But in terms of his final ball, his final, end product, I think he's right up there. But again, we haven't seen him do it at the highest level in the Champions League, in a Premier League title race. And so that, I think, is what's keeping him, again, off of that world-class level, or being, in the conversation. Enzo Fernandez is average. He's been, 105 million waste of money, absolute waste of money for a player that was maybe worth 30, 40 million at most, in terms of when you look at how good this guy actually is. Same thing with Conor Gallagher. He runs around a lot, gets a ton of praise for running around, but realistically, he's been Chelsea's best midfielder, but is that really saying much? I don't really think it is. So, yeah, I'm going to go with average for both of them. I think they've both been average this season. Next up, we have Alexis McAllister. For me, he goes into very good. I'm a big fan of McAllister. I think he's maybe lacking a little bit in physicality and maybe a little mobility as well. I think he can get caught out, especially when he was playing as a number 6. I don't think he's had the best season ever, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because he was playing out of position. He's not naturally a defensive midfielder, so we have to cut him some slack for that. And when he's allowed to go forward, he's a good player. He's very, very talented. He's an excellent passer of the ball. But I think next up we got Szoboszlai, and I think Szoboszlai has been better than McAllister this season. But I think they both go into very good. I don't think either of them are at that world-class level yet. And but yeah, that doesn't mean that they haven't been incredible players. I think Szoboszlai, his creativity, his goal scoring, he scored some absolutely fantastic goals for Liverpool this season. And I think he is a really, really special player that could, I think, become world class if he's coached right, if he's developed in a system that works for him. He is an unbelievable player. I think with him and McAllister, Liverpool have some absolutely amazing players on their hands, which I think gives them the potential for some staying power after Jurgen Klopp leaves. I think they could hang around. I don't think they're going to be as good, but they could still be a very decent team because they have players that have potential that are definitely going somewhere with their careers. Next up, we got Thomas Soucek. For me, he is decent. Let's put him in decent. Again, defensive midfielder, amazing at defending. He's very strong, very physical, good in the air, but he's just lacking on the ball. And I think that's why ultimately you see Declan Rice go for a huge fee. You see Declan Rice in the world-class conversation, or even the the best midfielder in the world conversation to some people. And Socek isn't. It's just that ability on the ball that I think is the main disparity between them. Next up, we have Paqueta. For me, I think he has to go into good, or maybe very good. I think we have to put him in very good. I like Paqueta a lot. And I think it's a shame that West Ham had such a down season last season. Didn't really give him the chance to show off his talent the best. But if you look at this season, he's been their best player along with Bowen in what is undeniably an incredible season for West Ham. They're going to get into Europe again. They might even, I don't think they're going to win the Europa League, but I mean, they have a shot at it. So, and Paqueta's been a huge, huge role in all of that. So, for me, he is absolutely on the level of Szoboszlai or Madison or Bruno Guimaraes. I love Paqueta. I think he's a fantastic player. Next up, Bruno Fernandes. You already know where he's going. Absolutely awful. Need I say more? This guy had a good season a couple years ago. Scored a bunch of goals. Was good at points last season, but this season has been absolutely atrocious. Gives the ball away like crazy. For me, he's too impatient. He always looks for that final ball. He doesn't know how to control a game. Doesn't know how to keep possession. Loses his head, whines, complains. I don't understand how Man United fans sleep at night knowing this guy is their captain. For me, he should be nowhere near Manchester United. He should be nowhere near the captaincy. He just isn't good enough. I think he's got the talent. I think he just isn't doing it for whatever reason right now. So, absolutely disgraceful for Bruno Fernandes. Christian Eriksen, for me, is in the same boat, kind of, in terms of his ability. I think that his legs are gone. I just don't think he can do it at the top level anymore. The amount of times we see him get bypassed in midfield is too much, and I don't think that he has the creativity to make up for it anymore. And listen, I think the fact that he's still playing is an absolute miracle considering what happened at the Euros, and I think that is 100% a credit to himself and his own, his toughness and his resilience. But listen, I think that he's just done playing at the highest level for a team like Manchester United, and I think he'll be a great story, one of the greatest comeback stories in all of sports, and I'll forever respect him for that. I think most football fans should forever respect him for that. But in terms of his ability right now as a midfielder, it's just not there. It really just isn't there. Casemiro, for me, has been average this season. He had a very good season last season. But this season, he's been absolutely, nowhere near the kind of authoritative, commanding figure that he was. And I just don't think that he is... Man United need a new defensive midfielder. I think that's why they signed Amrabat, was to be that replacement. But obviously Amrabat's been a disaster. But yeah, Casemiro's finished. The guy is absolutely finished. Again, at the top level, he's just not good enough anymore. But I think he's been the only Man United midfielder besides Kobe Mainoo to show anything this season in terms of having a little bit of control over games and a little bit of fight. But apart from that, he's not been good enough. But then again, I can't really say that he's been any worse than someone like Conor Gallagher. So we got to put him in average. Yuri Tielemans is good, in my opinion. Not great, but, I think he's kind of fallen off the hype train a little bit. But he's still a good player. Still, plays well for Aston Villa, I think. But next up, we got Douglas Luiz. It's so glitchy. What the heck? For me, it's between these two. And I think we're going to have to put him in very good. I rate him super highly. I think he's a fantastic player. So I'm going to put him in very good. But you guys let me know if you think that that's a bit too generous for Douglas Luiz. But I think he's sensational. The way he's evolved his game, adding goals, adding assists, the way he, gets into the box, makes late runs. That's all sensational. And then again, I think defensively, he's a very good player. So, yeah, I think we got to put him in very good. Emi Buendia has been injured for the entire season. Same with Mason Mount. They have barely played, so we're going to have to put them in hasn't played. Matias Nunes, for me, he's been average. I think Pep Guardiola doesn't trust him fully. I think when you see, the fact that he played, John Stones in midfield ahead of Nunes, the fact that he played Rico Lewis, Julian Alvarez, who aren't even midfielders, I think that just shows that he hasn't really been trusted in the biggest games. And when he's played, I just don't think he's been. I don't think he's been that good, but he hasn't been terrible. So we're gonna put him in average. And then Lavia, I've not seen Lavia play this season for Chelsea. I'm just gonna put him in hasn't played. So, let's see, am I happy with everything? Let's see if there's any changes I want to make. No, I think we're good. I think I like this list. I think it looks pretty good. So, yeah. Anyways, of course, let me know what you guys think in the comments, and of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I will see you guys in a bit.